Oh, the stage is huge. So, hello everybody. I'm Jane, and I'm going to talk about how to get the best out of your design team. So why is this a useful thing to know? Well, these little fellows represent all of you here today. Some of you might be design adjacent. Some of you might even be a little bit design curious. But most of you won't ever have worked as a designer. In fact, most of you would have a career path a little bit like this. Some of you might have a career path coming in from engineering. And some of you might be a bit of a squiggly generalist coming in from sales or marketing or even operations into product leadership. But I'm sure quite a few, not very many of you have had a career path like this. Surprisingly few, actually. But I think a lot of you in this room are going to end up either leading a design team or having design in your organization or managing a design team, and it might leave you feeling a little bit like this. So let's talk about how to get the best out of working with designers, which will 10x your impact too. And even if you don't work with designers, perhaps I can offer a new perspective or some frameworks that might come in useful. So as someone who's made this journey from design into product, I've got one key observation, is that product and design are like England and America. They're two nations divided by a common language. And by the way, I am totally obsessed with this picture of George Bernard Shaw. Doesn't he look like a vegan coffee shop barista? So I can help translate these kind of conversations to something a little bit more like this. And obviously, as with my background being design and research, I've done some research for this talk today. I've done some research with product people, some with designers, and I've tried to unpack and understand what frustrations they have with each other. So a lot of it is around the right kind of research or the wrong kind of research, dogmatism about research. Some of it is about spending time on the wrong thing or feeling that you're too stretched. More bloody research, but the designers are saying, well, I don't trust that we actually know this. Product people saying, I know what we need. Why can't you just go and design it? And design team are saying, well, we just don't want to just execute your idea. Product managers getting really fed up with designers trying to sneak things onto the roadmap, and designers saying, well, I saw user struggle with this in research. Why can't we just fix it? And of course, the bloody MVP. Why can't you just design the MVP? And designers are saying, well, I don't trust we're ever going to go back and iterate on the MVP. So to summarize these frustrations, bye little fellas. To summarize these frustrations, I think these are these key 5 points that product and design struggle with when they work together. Number one is, what research do we need? Too much work, too little team. MVP, or MVPs, no. Handing solutions to the team. The design team hates getting solutions handed to them. And somehow both product and design sort of rub each other up the wrong way. So I've got some solutions for this. The first one is going from what research we need to right research at the right time. Now, I love a good framework. So I've tried to think about how you can articulate product strategy over time, and I've come up with this. So first of all, we start with futures. Futures is the product vision. The product vision describes the future of the product or the future that the product might unlock. Features are your roadmap. They're things that you create in service of your product vision. And then you have frictions. That's when people are using the product, and these are problems that they might have with your product or how you use the service. And you know this through data and analytics. Now, the reason I put this as a pyramid is that futures, obviously, by definition, we know the least about. Features we know a bit more because we'd be doing research and prototyping. And at the bottom is frictions. That's data and analytics. And, of course, it's real people using things in real time. And that's what we have the most data about. So I've taken this framework and tried to understand what it might look like across horizons. So here it is. Well, by the way, I said I love a framework. You know what I love more than a framework? As Emily said, I love a double diamond. And do you know what I love more than a double diamond? A triple diamond. So here's my triple diamond of futures, features, and friction. So it's that pyramid expressed over time. So the future, you would do research to build the right thing. So that might be things like foundational research. You might be understanding the value proposition. You might be using quant data here to try and understand like pricing strategies or market sizing. Then you have features. That's about execution. That's building the thing right. And you might be doing things like prototyping or jobs to be done frameworks. And then you have friction. Friction is when something actually exists in the world and you want to optimize it and improve it. And that's where you start using things like data, analytics, experimentation, optimization. But even when you're at this end, when you're looking at frictions and when you're working with data and planning experimentations, I believe you still need qual. So let me tell you a story. Yes, this is a picture of Viagra. Why am I showing you a picture of Viagra? Well, I was doing some consultancy with an online pharmacist, and they were wondering, they were looking to ways to improve their product. And one thing they noticed is there was a massive dropout at the point of asking for an email. So they were thinking, all right, maybe it's time to do some experimentation, do A/B testing. How do we encourage people to sign up and give the email? And I said, well, maybe we should take a step back. If you think about it, in Britain, you can get Viagra free from your GP. Why are you going to pay to an online pharmacist? You know, there's maybe something about the context of use here. So we did some qual research, and we discovered that, people were quite embarrassed about buying Viagra, and they were really scared that email was going to get spam. Hi, James, here's your Viagra. More Viagra this week, James. People were terrified. So instead of doing this experimentation, what we did is through the insight of the qual, we were able to put trust signals all through the experience and explain to people what we were doing with our email and reassure them. And there was a massive uptick in emails. But there's another story I've got about how frictions can unlock new futures as well. So when I was at Moo, I don't know if you know Moo, it's an online sort of print shop. We had a fabulous product manager called Brad, and he discovered there was a bit of the product which was pretty rubbish. But somehow it was giving us huge amounts of revenue, and he couldn't really understand why. So again, we did some qual research, and we discovered that this was because the people using this were professional designers, but they were one-man band professional designers who were buying lots of design and print on behalf of their clients. And this was a fantastic insight because we were able to use the qual and the quant and understand who these people were, what their needs were. It allowed us to build this new feature here, which was the PDF uploader. But it unlocked a new future as well because it allowed us to understand this new audience segment that we were able to market to and we were able to create new aspects of the product for. So I'm a huge, huge believer that you need qual and you need quant. But still, how do you know what research to do at the right time? Well, you have to take a step back and operate from first principles. First principles means that you break everything you know into its most foundational pieces. You break it right down, and then you build it back up again. And one of the ways to do this is a thing that we used at Moo. This was my Yanni. I hired him at Moo, and he actually built this canvas. So this is the riskiest assumption canvas. So you break everything into first principles, and you ask, what do we actually know, and where are we making an assumption? But then you don't just go and do the research. You then understand where's the biggest risk if we get this wrong. And then you multiply risk times assumption, and you're able to prioritize the research that you need to do. And that way you can get the team to focus their time and effort on the research and the work that really matters. Which leads me to my next point. What happens if you've got too much work and too little team? Well, you need to start thinking about high leverage activities. And what I mean by high leverage activities actually comes from this book, High Output Management, which is a big Silicon Valley favorite. It's by Andrew S. Grove. He used to be the leader of Intel. And he talks in this book about high leverage activities, where you make a little bit of effort and unlocks outsized value. And in my opinion, a high leverage activity for a product person is to frame the strategy, the business needs, the user problem, and get the whole team aligned to solving them together. And also help your team be comfortable with the parts of the product that are just not great by giving them some context. Because if you're super clear about the vision and the future, and also how you're going to differentiate from your competitors, then your team will understand what they're working on and why, and what they need to focus on to deliver that impact and that differentiation. So here's an example. there we go. So this is the example. This isn't actually true. I've completely made this up. I've done this just to show what happens when you focus on something that allows you to differentiate. So imagine the go-to-market strategy for Google Slides. So basically, they weren't so bothered about it being easy to use. I mean, you've all used Google Slides here. They're a bit of a pain in the bum. They don't really care that much about the ability to make the slides look good. But where they put in a huge amount of effort was making sure that they had the ability to collaborate. And this was their key differentiation point. So if you can help your team understand that this is what you need to focus on, this is the thing that's going to allow you to differentiate and win, and these other things are not so important. It might stop this, constant asking to get things on the roadmap, and people have been really stressed because they've seen somebody struggling with this in research. But we'll say, it's okay, yes, they are struggling, but we're not going to fix that right now. Now, I want to differentiate this from an MVP. Because a constant frustration I spoke to, the designers I spoke to, was not just that things weren't getting fixed, but also the way that MVPs were used. And loads of them felt that the MVP was just really like a rubbish version of something done in a rush and never reworked. So how do you change it? How do you get people to agree the MVP? Well, I think reframing what the MVP actually is. So look, let's think about the MVP as the least you can do to give you the strongest signal that you're right and ready to take the next step. So you might want to build a feature because the competition has it, or it's a hygiene factor, or for some other reason. If it's a no-brainer, if you're sure about needing it, don't spend so much time in discovery research. But if you're not sure, experiment. So what I think an MVP is the least that you can do to give certainty. It's the least that you can do to have enough knowledge and enough conviction to take the next step. And how do you create an MVP? Well, you need to start with a hypothesis. So here, a good hypothesis has a dependent variable, an independent variable, drop a ball, and you must predict the effect, it will fall to the ground. So why is this so important? Why is it so important to do this kind of research? Well, basically, humans are notoriously bad at predicting future behaviour. Now, you probably all know this quote from Henry Ford. If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Well, actually, there's no evidence he said this. But somehow this has endured, this quote. And often it's used wrongly for people to say, well, we don't need any research at all. But the reason I think it's endured is that it is fundamentally true. You cannot ask people what they want. People have no idea. People can't predict their future behaviour. Simply asking them what they want leads you into the product death cycle, where no one's using your product. You ask people what's missing, they tell you, you build them, nobody uses your product, and then you end up spinning. Another way to think about this is the kind of field of dreams go-to-market strategy. If you build it, they will come. Well, generally, they don't. So another thing I'd like to think about is the MVP versus the increment. So there, I've framed the MVP as something that you can do to learn and to give you signals and certainty. I think an increment is something a little bit different, but you know what? It doesn't really matter what the definition is. But I think an increment is when you know what you're building and you're trying to assess the waves in which you're releasing something. So, for example, here, we've got a login. So at the login, you can see the very basic thing that you need to build is to be able to enter your email and password and make sure that you're able to get your password if you've forgotten it. Other things come later. They're different parts of the increment, and you don't need them immediately. So basically, an increment allows you to have small slices of the product and then make sure that you're building things in order of priority and order of impact. Now, this also means that you'll be working with the team to try and understand what is the effort, what is the value, what is the impact. And this is another solution to solutionizing. So one of this is the opportunity solution tree. I love this too. I think it's great. It's just from Teresa Torres. And it has several phases. The first is the outcome. The outcome is what you as a product manager can frame. That's your high leverage activity. Then you have opportunities. Opportunities are things that come from research. And finally, you have the solutions, and you would think about these with the team. You collaborate together to have solutions. And then to see which solution you should go for, you create some experiments, which in my opinion is the MVP. Oh, excuse me, I'm so thirsty. Did I bring some water up? I did not. Not to worry. Okay, so here's one that I prepared earlier. This is one that I worked on for a car company that wanted to sell direct to consumer. So you see the outcome space is the business need. They wanted to 5x the amount of online sales of electric cars that they had. We had the opportunity space. The opportunity space was based on research. And you can see that we had a customer need, a customer pain point, and a customer desire. And let's unpack this a little bit. The customer pain point was that they couldn't really understand how much an electric car would cost to run. So we came up with 3 potential solutions to this. The first is a subscription with all costs included. The second was a running cost calculator tool. And the final one was a partnership with an electricity company. So which one of these to build? I don't know. So what we did then was start thinking about like small experiments that we could do to see which one of these solutions was the best to build. And this was our MVP. These were our experiments, which we structured. Oh, thank you. Thirsty work talking? Oh, it's so much better. Thank you. Yeah. So each of these experiments were ones, these were our MVPs. These were the small experiments that we could do to give us the least amount of information, to give us certainty to take the next step. And again, everything I've showed you here has been about collaboration, about the teams working together. These sort of canvases and frameworks, etc. They're basically artifacts that allow conversation and for the team to come together and solve the problems together. But you also must make sure that when you're working together, that you don't rub each other up the wrong way. You need to collaborate. Collaborate is fundamental in delivering great products. And I'm sure you all know about this, the product trio, where you have design, product, and engineering, leading the team, making collaborative decisions, and working together in a really balanced way. So this is great, and I'm not going to go into it too much because I'm sure everyone knows about this, but I'd like to kind of zoom out from the product trio and think about the unit of delivery as the team. So this is a poster from GDS. So basically, if you think about the unit of delivery as the team, like what does that mean? Well, you have to think about who's in the team, what are they doing, what kind of people are there, what kind of context are they working on, because every team is unique. And that made me think about when everybody comes to a conference like this, or you're reading books, and I've worked with a lot of like more junior product managers, and often people get really, really stressed about, I'm not using this technique, or I'm not using that technique, and we have to do all of this. Now, I love this quote, because it's trying to say that basically you have simplicity because you don't know anything, and you have complexity because you know quite a lot. But when you know a huge amount, you can go back to simplicity again and focus on the things that really matter. And this is a quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes, another one of my series of Victorians that looked like they're running a cool barbershop in Hoxton. And you might also know Oliver Wendell Holmes because he was an American lawyer and jurist, and he came up with that concept of trying to define the limits of free speech, which was you cannot shout fire in a crowded theatre. So I think this quote's really interesting about mastery is also about simplicity. What I think he's trying to say is something like this. Be the guy on the left. Make sure you understand the context of your team and what's going on and who's in there, and use collaboration tools and frameworks that are appropriate for them, rather than just things that you might have picked up at a book or a conference. Have that sort of courage and calmness just to focus on things that really matter, which is also a really high leverage activity for a product manager. And there's another thing you can do to make sure that you're not rubbing the team up the wrong way and make sure that you have great collaboration, is to focus on feedback. There's 3 types of feedback. The first feedback is reaction-based feedback, when you say, I like it. There's probably only one thing worse than this. But this is terrible feedback because it's incredibly subjective, and what is the designer supposed to do with this bit of information? But I said there's only one thing worse than somebody saying that they hate it. Actually, that's not true. This is the worst thing you can say to somebody. Make it pop. This is direction-based feedback where you're telling people what to do. So things like make the CTA bigger, make the button blue, move the lock-in box. All of this is just telling people what to do without context. And when designers complain about, the product managers are coming to them with solutions, this is often what they're complaining about. So instead, what you need to do is not give this personal, subjective, directional feedback, but instead take a step back and offer critique. So critique is when you identify what the design is trying to do, you relate it back to the objectives of the work, and then the discussion is about how the design supports the objective. But the designers owe you something too. This is not just a product activity. The designers have to be part of this. They can't just give you a real estate tour. They can't just say, oh, here's a button, and there's the login. They have to also own and understand the metrics in the business so they can talk about how their design supports this. And if you're struggling, this is a wonderful book by Ben Sauer. Get your teams to read it because it helps them move away from the real estate tour and into the world of critique, which you need to encourage them to do. Now, the reason I'm showing you this map here is I was thinking, what does it take to be really good at your job? Well, 3 things: mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And I believe that a designer who has mastery is not just creative, but really has to understand what it is they're doing and why in the context of the business, in the context of metrics. They need to understand the strategy. They can't just go off and be a creative genius. This is what your design team owes you. But what you owe them is that high leverage activity of making sure that they are informed. They provide the mastery, you provide the purpose, and together you need to be autonomous to work on the solution. So this is how you empower your design team, get them working really well, and also 10x your impact. To sum up then, to make sure that you're working really well with the design team, you need the right research at the right time. You need to have high leverage activities, both from you and the team, and you need to know what you're working on and why you're spending your time on X instead of Y. You need to agree what an MVP is for, and not just to make it something a little bit rubbish that you can just forget about, but make sure an MVP is there, it's something that you're learning from. You need to come together to create the solutions, and you can use all sorts of frameworks and canvases, etc., but they have to be right for you. They have to enable and empower great collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane.